Hi there fabric jugglers, it's Babs here from MyFieryPhoenix, and today I am working on an upcycle project for taking a couple of Pashmina style scarves and converting them into a kimono. It's a very simple project. It only takes 3 maybe 4 steps and then you're done. This was requested by Penny Lane, a member of the Starting to Sew group on Facebook. I've put a link in the description below if you want to check out the Facebook group. And Penny, I really hope that this helps you. What we need for this make are 2 scarves. Preferably matching, but obviously it doesn't have to. But bear in mind that you'll have 1 scarf on the left side, 1 scarf on the right side. So you just need to keep that in mind when you're picking your scarves or your fabric choices. For those of you that don't have 2 scarves, I've got my little notes here. I've got the size of fabrics that you need, and which is 70 by 27 inches, and you'll need 2 of those. You will also need a tape measure. You'll need some scissors. I've got seam ripper just in case, and you will need some pins. And I generally tend to keep a pencil around in case I need to make a note of something as I'm going along. So you guys grab those goodies and we'll get started. So the first thing we need to do with these scarves is make a note of the centre, and the simplest way to do that is simply fold them in half, and then what we're going to do is measure down 5 inches on one side. So we'll just measure down and we'll pop a pin in there just so that I know where that is, and this is only on one side for the time being, because what we're going to do now is sew these together along that shorter portion. So we need right sides facing, and if you're using the same pattern, try to match the pattern slightly. Nothing will be more obvious than if you're out by a centimetre or 2. So just pin those together as I throw my pin cushion around. I tend to pin on the pattern points that I want to match, so that I can be sure that they're going where I want them to go, and that everything is lining up as I want it to. You can always move things around slightly as you are sewing, but this is a quick and easy make. It's not something we need to spend too long deliberating over. I'm using a seam allowance that is the width of my presser foot for this project. You can of course choose to use any seam allowance that you like. Just make sure that you're consistent throughout the entire make. It just makes life that little bit easier for you as long as you're consistent. A couple more pins and then I can start sewing this first seam. And if you can hear any strange bangs or crashes in the background, that would be Sophie, my puppy, who is deciding that she wants to eat a dustpan and brush. So she's making a huge amount of noise out of that at the moment. There we go. So that's all pinned in now, so we can get the sewing machine out. Now hopefully from where you are you'll be able to see what I'm doing. As I say, these are very straightforward seams. There's nothing overly exciting that you need to have a close-up view for. And make sure that you backstitch at the beginning and the end of your row of stitches that you're about to do. I've got this set to a stitch length of 2 and a straight stitch. And as I say, I'm going to be going in just the width of my presser foot. So as I say, back tack to begin with, and then sew on through. So again, back stitch, just for security. And that is the first row of stitches done. I'll just pop the machine out of the way just for a moment. As I say, this if you're using ready-made scarves, then you don't need to seal off those edges. You don't need to overstitch in any way. However, if you are using your own fabric up to the sizes that I gave at the beginning of the video, then you will need to overlock or zigzag along those edges. That's just something to bear in mind. And I'll just trim away this last loose end. There we go. Okay, so now we have the back of the shawl created. And if we've pattern matched it nicely, then all of these should be fairly simple to see. So that's nice. The pattern does look quite pleasant from the back. What we're going to do now is fold over one side, and we're not going to fold it over outside. We're going to fold it over so that the right sides are together again. So we're going to work on either the right or the left side, and then we'll leave the other side off, out of the way, so that we don't actually have that involved in the process. And everything that we do on one side, we will eventually be doing on the other side as well. So I'm just going to pin this together just so that I've got a stable corner. I know where we're going. And then the measurements we will be using are 9 inches in from the edge. So we'll be coming in 9 inches, and make sure if you've got fabric that has these tassels that you try and keep them out of the way. Otherwise you'll end up cutting through tassels, which isn't necessarily what we want to do. So we need to come in 9 inches and mark that. That's here. And now we definitely want to go through both layers of fabric at this point. And we want to come up 19. Again, mark that here. And this is how we create our sleeve. So we're going to mark, again, 19 at the 9 inch mark. We're going to mark in a sleeve using pins or using a pencil or whatever it is you want to use. So I shall just briefly pin up here. And we don't need to worry too much, because the piece that we cut out, which is the next step, will be used to create the matching measurements on the other side. So here we're coming across, we're going to come round slightly. Take the tape measure away before it falls off the table, and then come round. And this really is very loose. We don't have to panic about it being a particularly structured or accurate measurement. It just needs to be coming up to that 9 inch mark. And then what we're going to do is sew around that. Once we've sewn around it, we'll remove the pins and then cut it out and use that as the template. Again, this is where the consistency comes in, and we need to use whatever measurement we're using with our stitch line. We need to be consistent when we cut this away from the stitch line as to how we sew that. You'll see what I'm talking about in a minute. So I'm just going to sew this in place. Again, we're going to use the back stitch at the beginning and at the end. And make sure that we take our pins out of the way as we go, and that we keep the tassels out of the way of the stitches. Because again, we don't want tassels sewn in so that it looks rather unattractive. We back tack to begin. And then we start to sew. There we go, that's the last pin removed. And so we are going to back stitch. There we are. So again, I'll move this out of the way. Put away the loose ends. And then, in a process that scares some people, we're going to cut away all the excess fabric that we've just sewn around. So now we're going to cut out this portion. And bearing in mind that the width of seam allowance that you are using, bearing in mind that you will then need to use a zigzag stitch of some sort or an overlock to stop the fraying edges. Make sure that you allow enough space for that process to take place, and just cut around and follow the stitch line. As I say, what we're going to do is then use this piece that we're cutting away as the template so the other side matches. So here we have our first armhole. And that will look like this. No, it won't. That's the centre of the back. It will look like that. There we go. So we've got a nice deep armhole, and then we've got a side seam, and we're going to replicate that on the other side. So to do that, we simply match up the bottom ends. So there's our centre line. So this is our outside edge. Pin that in place. If you're ever not sure, make sure that you use lots and lots of pins. If you're not happy with where something is falling, or if it's going to be moving a lot, use a lot of pins. So I'm going to now take one of these. You don't need both. And this will become my pattern. So just, again, make sure all the loose ends are out of the way. Make sure that this is aligned. Pin it in place just so that it's got a grab point. And then we put in the piece that we've just cut out. And then use this as our template. It's always best to spend more time checking that the fabric is where you expect it to be, rather than anything else. And I'm going to pin this in place just roughly, because I will be cutting through everything before I sew now. Rather than drawing on this or pinning on this, I'm simply going to cut through it all, so that I've got a nice pattern. Okay, so let's just get cutting. Again, make sure that your tassels are where they actually naturally fall before you start cutting. Careful not to cut through any pins. And this is why it doesn't really matter how acute a curve or how gradual a curve you make. It's completely by eye, because you then use that first curve as the pattern piece for the second sleeve. So if I take away all my spare pins so I don't stab myself later on, there we go, I knew there was one in there. And we've got some very nice spare fabric for some other project. And now simply pin these in place and sew it, which will be quicker than last time, because now we're just running along that edge with the same seam allowance that we've been consistently using throughout this project. Again, remember that you will be starting with a back tack so that everything is nice and strongly secured. Again, trim away any loose threads, and on to the very last step, which is to zigzag these raw edges. So I just changed to a medium size zigzag. I'll make sure by walking through once that the zigzag doesn't go beyond my, my hemline. And again, we'll be back tacking this for security, and then just sew straight down. I tend to sew both seams together into one, or rather both sides of the seam together into one, because this is a lightweight fabric, it's not a big deal. If you prefer to do them individually, you're doubling the work, but you're welcome to do that. You could of course use something like fray stop, but personally I don't see the benefit to that, seeing as how this is such a quick process, and that to my mind is just very messy and fiddly. And this is the first one done, and we'll just move on to the second, and then you're good to go. So this is the original. Now I've just got to find my second sleeve. So that's the one that's done, so this is the side that has yet to be done. There we go. Again, back tacking. I know it's very boring that I keep saying it, but it is important. And that is us finished in terms of all the sewing. One more snip, and that will tidy away the loose ends. And we have a completed kimono, which I will model for you, but not indoors. I shall go and do that outside. So here we go. One kimono. Now hopefully this tutorial has been useful to you, hopefully it's been of interest to you, and Penny, I hope it explained how to do the arms, which I know you were struggling with. So if you've got any requests, if you've got any suggestions, then please give me a shout, drop me a message, give me some feedback, and hopefully I will see you again. Bye for now.